Picture climbing onto a wheel taller than your entire body. You tap one tiny pebble in the road, and you get catapulted face first into the cobblestones at full speed. They called it taking a header, and it happened so often it got its own name. To understand how we ended up with the comfy little bike sitting in your garage, we have to rewind, way back, to the wooden, teeth-rattling death traps that came first. Because here is the thing nobody ever tells you. The bicycle was not invented, it was survived. It took almost 70 years of broken bones, bruised egos, and absolutely deranged design choices to drag this thing from a literal torture device to something you let your 6-year-old ride to school. And believe it or not, the entire saga kicked off because of a volcano. No, seriously. Stick with me, because this gets dumb fast. We have to go back to the year 1815. A mountain called Tambora, sitting way over in Indonesia, decided to throw the single biggest tantrum in recorded human history. It erupted so violently that it fired a wall of ash clean across the entire planet. The sky went dark, global temperatures nosedived, and the very next year, 1816, earned itself a cheerful little nickname, the year without a summer. Crops rotted in the fields, snow fell in June, frost wiped out harvests in the middle of what was supposed to be growing season. And here comes the part that actually matters to our story. No crops means no food. No food means no oats. And no oats means you cannot feed your horses. So horses started starving to death. By the thousands. Now really sit with that for a second. In 1816, a horse was not a pet. A horse was your car, your delivery truck, your ambulance, and your Uber, all rolled into one snorting package. So when the horses started dropping dead, the entire world just got stranded, grounded. Forced to walk everywhere like absolute peasants, people were genuinely, hopelessly stuck. Enter a German baron named Karl von Drais. Now, Karl was a forestry official by day, and a full-time eccentric inventor by every other hour. The man had a brain that fired off bad ideas at 1,000 miles an hour, and every so often, one of them actually worked. So Karl stared at this horse apocalypse and had a thought that was equal parts genius and completely unhinged. What if you just built a horse you did not have to feed? A machine you powered with your own 2 legs. So in 1817, he bolted together 2 wooden wheels, lined them up one behind the other, slapped a padded beam across the top to sit on, and stuck a little bar up front so you could steer. And that was it. That was the whole machine. No pedals, no chain, no gears, no brakes. You sat on it, and you ran. Like a toddler on a balance bike, except you were a grown man with a waxed mustache and a top hat. He called it the Laufmaschine. The running machine. Everybody else called it the dandy horse, or the hobby horse, because the only people who could afford one were rich young show-offs who wanted to look expensive while scooting around the park. And honestly, it kinda slapped. Karl reportedly covered ground in a fraction of the time it took to walk. For about 5 glorious minutes, the man was a legend. And then it all went sideways. Because these wealthy goobers immediately started riding their wooden horses on the sidewalks. At speed. Directly into pedestrians. Folks were getting absolutely bowled over by mustachioed men on glorified scooters, and the complaints piled up so fast that cities like London, New York, and even Calcutta straight up banned the thing from public paths. Let me say that again. The world's very first bicycle got cancelled. The dandy horse died a quick and humiliating death, and for the next 40 years, the entire concept of a 2-wheeled, human-powered machine just sat in a corner, gathering dust and shame. Until the 1860s, when a French father and son team, the Michaud family, looked at the old forgotten running machine and asked the one obvious question that somehow took 4 whole decades for a human being to think of. What if your feet did not have to touch the ground at all? What if we just bolted some pedals directly onto the front wheel? Boom! Revolutionary. Now you could sit down, crank your legs around in a circle, the wheel would spin, and you would roll forward without grinding your boots into dust. There was just one teeny tiny problem. The frame was made of iron. The wheels were made of wood, wrapped in a thin little band of iron for a tire. And the roads back then were cobblestone. Glorious, lumpy, brain-scrambling cobblestone. So riding this thing felt less like a pleasant cruise, and a lot more like sitting on a paint mixer cranked to maximum, while a stranger repeatedly punched you in the spine. The vibrations were so violent, so relentless, so genuinely brutal, that people stopped using its fancy French name, the velocipede, and started calling it what it truly was, the Boneshaker. And that name was not an exaggeration. Riders would climb off after just a couple of miles, feeling like they had been thrown down a staircase while trapped inside a washing machine. But here is the truly unhinged part. People loved it anyway. Riding academies popped up all across Paris. Indoor rinks opened so the wealthy could practice rattling their molars loose in a nice, controlled environment. The Boneshaker became a full-blown international craze, despite the fact that it was actively assaulting every single person who climbed aboard. Humans, ladies and gentlemen, we will suffer literally anything to look cool. But the Boneshaker was hiding a deeper, nerdier problem under all that spine trauma. And the way they solved it is exactly what created the most insane vehicle in this entire story. See, because the pedals were bolted straight onto the front wheel. One full turn of your legs equaled precisely one full turn of the wheel. That is it. So how fast you could possibly go came down to one single factor: how big the wheel was. A bigger wheel covers more ground with every pedal stroke. Same exact logic as how longer legs let you walk faster with fewer steps. So some absolute galaxy-brained engineer in the early 1870s looked at this and reasoned, well, if a bigger wheel means more speed, then logically, the biggest possible wheel must mean the most possible speed. And so, they made the wheel bigger, and then so unbelievably, catastrophically enormous, that the front wheel on these things ballooned out to nearly 5 feet across, taller than some of the actual humans riding them. And just behind this monster sat a tiny, sad, pathetic little wheel, barely along for the ride, looking like it wandered into the picture completely by accident. The British took one look at this contraption, with its giant wheel up front and its little wheel out back, and named it after their own pocket change. The big penny coin, sitting right next to the tiny farthing. The Penny-Farthing. And against all logic, it instantly became the coolest, fastest, most prestigious machine on 2 wheels. It was the supercar of the 1870s. If you rode one, you were rich, you were daring, and you were statistically very likely to be moments away from death. Because let us actually talk about what it was like to ride one of these nightmares. First, you had to get up there. There was a tiny peg sticking off the back of the frame. You had to grab the handlebars, scoot the whole machine forward to get it rolling, hop one foot onto that peg, and then haul your entire body up onto a seat perched a full 5 feet in the air, balanced directly over the center of a wheel that was taller than you. Congratulations! You were now sitting higher than a person standing next to a horse, with absolutely nothing to catch you. No suspension, no brakes worth the name, and solid rubber tires that did precisely nothing to cushion the inevitable. And then there was the header. Oh, the beautiful, terrible header. Because your entire body weight was perched basically right on top of the front axle, the physics of this machine were a ticking time bomb with a smile painted on it. If that giant front wheel struck anything at all, a rock, a pothole, a curb, a stray dog, a particularly confident twig, the wheel would stop dead instantly, but you would not. Sir Isaac Newton would reach up out of the grave, grab you by the collar, and fling you forward, up and over the handlebars, off the very top of the entire machine, head first, straight into the ground, from a height of roughly 6 feet. They called it taking a header, or, if you preferred to sound fancy about your near-death experience, coming a cropper. And these were not gentle little spills. People shattered wrists, cracked their skulls wide open, snapped collarbones like dry twigs. Some riders straight up died, right there in the street, killed by a bicycle. The Penny-Farthing was so famous for spiking its owners face first into the cobblestones that riders actually developed a survival technique, and this technique perfectly sums up how completely deranged this entire era was. When going downhill, where a header was pretty much guaranteed, the experienced riders would take both feet off the pedals, swing both legs up into the air, and hook them over the handlebars. The logic, and I want you to really appreciate this, was that if you were going to get violently ejected from this thing anyway, you would much rather get launched feet first so you could land running, instead of getting spiked head first into the road like a human lawn dart. That was the safety plan. Throw your legs in the air and pray to God. And this was peak bicycle. This was the single most advanced piece of personal transportation on planet Earth. A 5-foot wheel of doom that you climbed like a ladder and rode like a coin flip with your own life on the line. And somehow, for well over a decade, the entire world just accepted it. They genuinely believed this was as good as it was ever going to get. The bicycle had evolved into a gorgeous, gleaming, head-first murder machine, and society collectively shrugged and went, yeah, that is just the price you pay for speed. But not everybody was thrilled about the whole dying on a giant coin lifestyle. While the daredevils were busy hurling themselves off their enormous wheels for sport, A handful of quieter, smarter engineers were sitting in the back of the room thinking, hey, hold on. Maybe people should not have to perform a deadly circus stunt just to ride to the grocery store. Maybe we are doing this entire thing completely wrong. And here comes the twist that fixed absolutely everything. The breakthrough was almost insultingly simple. Instead of bolting the pedals directly onto the wheel and then growing the wheel to an ungodly size for speed, what if you put the pedals down in the middle of the frame, connected them to the back wheel using a chain, and built in a clever ratio of gears so that one single turn of the pedals spun the wheel around several times? Suddenly, you did not need a giant wheel at all. You could use two small, equal, completely reasonable wheels, plant yourself low and safe right in between them, and still go just as fast as the death machine. The chain quietly did all the work that the ridiculous wheel used to do. In 1885, a British inventor named John Kemp Starley built exactly that and called it the Rover. Two equal wheels, a chain driving the rear wheel, and a low seat that lets you actually reach the ground with your feet like a sane person. And they gave this new design a name that absolutely roasted everything that came before it. They called it the safety bicycle. Because the entire selling point, the whole earth-shattering innovation, was simply this. This one probably will not kill you. That is how low the bar had sunk. The big technological leap of the decade was a bike that no longer actively tried to murder its owner. And believe it or not, some people hated this. The Penny-Farthing diehards, the old-school daredevils, looked down their noses at the safety bicycle and sneered that it was for cowards, for weaklings. Real men, apparently, preferred to risk a fractured skull every single time they left the house. But common sense, for once in human history, actually won the fight. Then, in 1888, the final piece snapped into place, and it came courtesy of a Scottish veterinarian living in Belfast named John Boyd Dunlop. Now, Dunlop's young son was riding his tricycle around town on those rock-solid rubber tires, constantly whining that the ride was rough and gave him headaches. So Dunlop, being a dad with a workshop and a pile of rubber, did the single most dad thing in recorded history. He grabbed some rubber tubing, pumped it full of air, glued it around the wheels, and completely by accident reinvented the concept of comfort. The air-filled tire. The pneumatic tire. Now the wheels could actually squish and soak up every bump in the road instead of transmitting all of it directly into your spinal column. And that was it. That was the magic formula the entire world had been bleeding for over 70 years to find. Two equal wheels, a chain, a set of gears, and tires full of air. The Boneshaker was dead. The Penny-Farthing was instantly obsolete, parked in the garage of history forever. And in the span of just a few short years, the bicycle transformed from a terrifying circus act for thrill-seeking aristocrats into a cheap, safe, comfortable little machine that absolutely anybody could ride. And ride it they did. The entire 1890s detonated into a worldwide bicycle craze, millions upon millions of them sold. And for the very first time, regular everyday people, very much including women, could simply hop onto a machine and travel wherever they pleased, entirely under their own power, with no horse, no carriage, and crucially, without asking anybody for permission. It was such a massive cultural shift that a whole pack of clutching, panicked doctors actually invented a fake medical condition called bicycle face. They solemnly warned that all this reckless pedaling would permanently freeze your features into a wild-eyed, jaw-clenched, exhausted grimace. Spoiler alert, it would not. People just could not stand the sight of women out there having fun and freedom, so they straight up invented a disease about it. So the next time you casually swing your leg over a bike, click through your gears, gently squeeze your brakes, and roll smoothly down the street on a pair of nice, squishy, air-filled tires. Take just one single second. Remember that this boring, simple, perfectly safe little machine is the lone survivor of a 70-year gauntlet of exploding volcanoes, banned scooters, spine-pulverizing iron frames, and a 5-foot wheel that genuinely, regularly launched grown human beings headfirst into the pavement for entertainment. You are not riding a bicycle. You are riding the one design that finally, after decades of absolute carnage, figured out how to stop killing everybody. And the only reason it feels so safe and so boring to you today is that every single terrifying, ridiculous, header-inducing version of it had to crash and burn first. So pedal gently out there. A truly heroic number of broken collarbones went into making sure that you never, ever have to throw your legs over the handlebars and hope for the best.